Welcome back for another episode of the 5G Guys. I'm Wayne Smith and joined by my co-host Dan McVaugh.
Hey, Wayne, how's it going?
Going good.
Good to be back, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you joined us in our first season, we did a lot around cellular, obviously, because that's where Wayne and I have spent the bulk of our career. And we did an episode called Cellular 101, kind of going through the basics of how cellular works in the industry. If you haven't checked that out, go back and check that out. That was like episode 2 or 3, I think, one of our first ones. So we thought for this season, we would start diving into some other wireless technologies. And so today we want to talk about satellite. I know satellite's a hot topic. As everyone knows, there's some very popular business founders out there doing a bunch of satellite, but we thought we'd talk about wireless telecom as it relates to satellite. So what do you think, Wayne? Any thoughts on that? Want to dive into that?
No, I think it's a great subject. We hear a lot about it. I think it's one for us to talk about. Everybody's been spotting the Starlink spot, the lights in the air and in the sky this past summer. So I think it's perfect timing to jump right in.
Cool. So a lot of people may not realize, but satellite telecommunications has actually been around for, as long as cellular, maybe even longer. You've been able to get, satellite phones for mobile phone service, or obviously things like satellite TV, which people are familiar with Dish and the like. There's been satellite communications for a long time. So I guess starting there, you've got a satellite phone, right?
Yeah, I have it's funny, it's the Iridium network. So the Iridium phone that I have, I think I might have had it for 10 years. All I have to do is order a new card and get some minutes for it every year. They usually last 6 to 12 months. And I use that phone when I've traveled the planet where we didn't have cell coverage and I needed to have emergency connection to the company, going up in the mountains where you're down in valleys. That Iridium phone is pretty solid. Now, I think one of the things I would say about it is that just like anything, terrain has a big difference. Like if you're in a canyon and, just imagine that gap in that canyon, the satellite's only going to have it for a few minutes. Mm-hmm. So you don't have uninterrupted coverage out in the wilderness and in remote places, but you definitely have a connection and it works well. And I keep mine updated. I buy a new card every year. I rarely go through the minutes on the plan, but really solid connection to the outside world whenever you need it.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good way to kick off, is sort of talk about how the satellite networks are the same and different than cellular networks that we've talked about, right? So they're similar in that you've got a satellite or a group of satellites that are basically transmitting radio frequency waves to Earth to a subscriber device, and that subscriber device is transmitting radio frequency waves back to the satellite. It's a two-way communication in the case of your satellite phone, right? Versus so similar to a cellular network, and then that satellite has to get that data or that voice packet or whatever back to Earth somehow, right? Through a downlink or an uplink satellite link to an Earth station, and then it routes through the wired network, right? Our last episode, we talked about how wireless needs wires. Same case here, right? It's got to get back to Earth somehow and get managed. In the case of television, right? It's a broadcast. So it's just a one-way communication. Satellites just beaming stuff down to your house or your satellite dish, similar to a radio station or a TV station over the air on the Earth, right? So very similar. It's just the difference is your cell site or your satellite is, 22,000 miles away from Earth versus a mile away from you in a cellular situation, right?
Yeah, I think, and that brings up a great point. So in 98, the Iridium network, 98 was launched. It's a little bit of trivia since we like to do a little bit. I think it's pretty interesting. The first Iridium satellite phone call was made by Vice President Al Gore to Gilbert Grosvenor, the great-grandson of Alexander Graham Bell and chairman of the National Geographic Society. So pretty cool trivia there. The first call was made. Just like all companies, I think they had their challenges of launching and making the network. One thing that you brought up, I think, is interesting in the satellite world. From my understanding, you have your device, you have your modem, But they also use the concept of a knock, of where that base station is all from the satellite down to the knock and then back out. It's kind of interesting. I think we've seen those locations. It's very similar to, I think how cable TV's done, and the use of satellites to broadcast to a central location and out in the network. But to your point, as we discussed in detail, you have a network and it's hardwired to your dish. A lot of times that the dish that goes to the satellite is always pointing south. I think it's more unobstructed view, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, line of sight.
Line of sight, and then it's wired in your home just like anything else and connects to any type of network. But
So and the challenge that you have from the law of physics with a wireless connection. So for example, with cellular, right, you've got from your phone to the cell site to the cell tower, that wireless link, that radio frequency link is subject to all kinds of things that can happen to it, right? You have terrain blockage, you have trees, you have refraction and reflection off of buildings. In the case of satellite, it's the same thing. You have trees, you have terrain that can block, like you said, and you can also have weather that can affect a radio frequency wave. And one big difference between what happens with satellite versus with a lot of mobile cellular type applications is the frequency range that's being used. And we've talked about that a little bit. We had an episode last season that we talked about spectrum, and in a cellular application, much lower frequencies are being used. So they can transmit through and around those obstacles much, much better. And the distance from the serving node to the subscriber node is very close. When you get to satellite, they're using much higher frequency bands, actually bands very similar to what 5G is starting to use, right? Much higher frequency bands. Those don't go through and around things as well. So you really have to have more of line of sight. And like I said, when your subscriber device has to talk to a node that's 22,000 miles away, that's a long way to go. So the signal, you get a lot more signal loss over distance than you do in a terrestrial network. And so those are some of the challenges that satellite operators have, is they have to have subscriber devices that transmit higher power, have bigger, longer battery lives, or are plugged in all the time, like a dish, right? Connected to a set in your house if it's on your roof or something. And so that's an interesting kind of comparison to understand, is that these companies that are operating and building these satellite networks, they've got a lot more challenges in technology and engineering that they have to solve. They have to solve how to keep this thing up in space maintained, right? Something breaks, you don't just send a technician out in a truck to go fix it, right? They've got issues with where the lifespan of the satellite and things like that. So it's an interesting thing to sort of think about, but there's so many similarities as well in terms of, like we said, the connection to a core network, a NOC, Network Operations Center, I think is what NOC stands for. So yeah, so Iridium, like you said, that was one of the original voice satellite companies. We talked about Dish and companies like that. The Xfinities and the cable companies of the world, they've got satellite that they use to also beam their signals around. But today, we've also got a bunch of big new players coming out, right? Like you mentioned, Starlink. Let's talk about those a little bit. What do you know?
Yeah. Let me clarify one of my things about Iridium. I was doing a little research to make sure, as we prepare ourselves for our podcast, sometimes we're up on it and sometimes we have to go do research on our subjects. As I was sitting here looking, interesting about SpaceX launched all new Iridium satellites, 65 total between 2017 and 2019. And so SpaceX, Iridium has a new satellite network of 75 satellites up in there in low orbit versus the original version. So I wanted to clarify that because give them the due. They are running a more modern network with all new satellites, and they're using SpaceX, and which jumps us into the new frontier of space travel, and satellite communications. Starlink, is Elon Musk's brainchild, and it's definitely a different, I don't know, you might have better way to explain their network, but it's a blanketing of the skies. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's going to be thousands and thousands. I think for them to provide high-speed satellite coverage to the U.S., they need 12,000 satellites in orbit, compared to Iridium's 75. So it's a totally different model. And I'll let you jump in a little bit there if you want.
Well, yeah, I guess the analogy I would say is, the same. So just like when we launched the first cellular networks, those networks had anywhere from 10 to, let's say, 100 or so cell sites to cover a typical large U.S. city, right? But then you look at those same cities today, as there's been increased number of subscribers, increased services, increased bandwidth, increased need for coverage. Now there's, thousands and tens of thousands of sites to cover that same area that we launched with, tens or hundreds. Same thing in satellite. If you think of each node in a network, each node has a specific capacity limit, right? Number of calls it can support, number of kilobits per second or megabits or gigabits per second it can support. So as a network gets more robust, has more customers, more demand, it naturally has to have more nodes, whether those nodes are a cell site or a satellite. So I think what we're seeing with the satellite industry right now is analogous to, they're sort of in their 3G phase, if you will. They're in their third generation of networks that are being launched, maybe their fourth. And with that, you're seeing more robust networks, larger number of nodes. They're going to be able to support a lot higher speeds and bandwidths if you're talking about data, a lot lower latency. So very similar. Like that's what we're talking about with 5G, right? 5G is much lower latency, like how quickly the network can respond to you pushing send or, clicking and sending a bit and requesting something back. These newer networks are higher throughput, lower latency. And so that also is part of what drives the numbers. But what's different is when you look at, for example, Viasat and HughesNet, those are two of the traditional satellite internet providers in the US. People that have homes in the mountains or out in where they can't get cable modem or DSL are familiar with them. And the service is not great, right? You get okay speeds. Your uplink is really bad, very limited. Those are using a very high orbit, geosynchronous. So those satellites just sit in one place. They, like you said, they orbit around the Earth at the same speed the Earth is spinning, but they're 22,000 miles away, right? So they can only do so much, and the network only has so much capacity. When you get to what's going on today and we'll talk about some of the competitors of Starlink, but Starlink and their 12,000 satellites right now, they've got about 2,000 satellites now. One reason that they also get better throughput and lower latency is they're a low Earth orbiting network. Now, they're not geosynchronous, right? They're spinning around the Earth and they're not synchronized where they're just staying over one location, but they're only 120 miles away, 200 miles away only. That's still a long ways, but compared to 22,000 miles away, right? Big difference. Yeah. Laws of physics, a lot less path loss between us and them, a lot less delay between us and those satellites for our signals. And so I think that's one big difference that you're seeing in the more recent networks that are being launched and why they're technically different.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, a quick word of thanks to today's sponsor, Vertex Innovations, before we get started. For over 17 years, Vertex has been building the nation's wireless and broadband networks. Providing project management, network engineering, and construction oversight are just some of the ways Vertex helps their clients. So if you're looking for more of a partner to help you with your wireless network designs, construction, implementation, or operations, reach out to Vertex. You can find them at vertex-us.com. That's VERTEX-us.com.
I think a thing that you said is the magic word is latency, right? The old latency, and we're still, seconds to milliseconds, it still makes the difference on how well the user experience is. And I don't know if a lot of people, really realize that there is a great need, even here in the U.S., for rural digital opportunities. I mean, we even have employees, since we have a remote workforce, we have employees who work and live in areas that don't have any kind of broadband connection. So we're always fighting for either a cellular connection or a HughesNet connection or a point to multi-point microwave connection, and they still struggle to work. one of the things that I've definitely noticed and what drives the need of this technology is that, yes, speeds are improving, but it's taking more to do work. It's not like the applications are not less intrusive. So say if you are getting 25 megabits down, which is good for rural areas, you may be using all of it up with your home, your kids, everything in your connection.
Mm-hmm.
So you still are barely getting by as a dial-up modem. And we struggle with it as a company still. We have, and so I definitely understand why Starlink's trying to deploy this, and the competitors, is that there's just so many places. Plus, wouldn't you think with what happened the last couple of years and the new to work from home and work from anywhere, that anywhere needs to have a connection and a good one.
Right. Yeah. And to your point, like in the US alone, I think the last number I heard is there's still 20 or 22 million homes in the US that don't have a broadband option. Right. And so when you look at those 22 million homes, and that's a huge market opportunity for a satellite provider to make those connections. And to your point, there's a lot of government money that's behind these initiatives to try to help bring broadband, because that's an important part of our economy. We need to get broadband to everyone and to make our GDP go up, to help with employment, to change the way employment's happening. I think you actually have some numbers on, for example, Starlink and what the subsidies that Elon Musk got from the federal government, right?
Yeah, and so it's pretty interesting. You can find this if you go online and look up RDOF, and it's a program for the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund from the FCC. And Starlink was awarded $900 million with a commitment to connect 640,000 locations across the United States. And if you go search that, it's definitely worth looking at. It kind of tells you that the government wants to bring that for economic development to all those communities too. And this is, I think, one way to say it too. When you talk about rural areas in the U.S., getting fiber in the ground is not always easy, and it's super expensive in some places. It depends on the rock and the terrain, but a fiber optic option is not always a cost-effective for rural applications in homes. So you have to have a different solution. So it's quite a bit of dollars. It's really a big program. I think what I read too is that they have a certain amount of time to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have about until 2028, to deploy all of their satellites to cover this and to bring rural broadband opportunities. But it's pretty amazing that we find ourselves in a place today with so many technological breakthroughs that just basic internet service is still not available to 22 million.
Yeah.
And when Dan says homes, that's not people. I think average home size 3 to 4, you start to look at it, that could be 100 million Americans or most.
Right. Now, this does point out a technical clarification we need to make too, which is when you look at a cellular network, it's a mobile network, right? You can go anywhere that there's coverage and use it and move with your network. Your Iridium satellite phone, same thing. When we're talking about HughesNet, Viasat, the incumbent internet service providers, satellite internet service providers, and the new ones that are coming down the link like Starlink, those are fixed, right? Just like your satellite TV. You can't take your satellite TV with you. It's fixed. It's installed in one place and you use it there. So that's an important thing to understand, is we're not talking about mobile networks with these new satellite networks. They're all fixed. They're point to point, effectively, point to multipoint. So that's an important factor. I think to go into some additional facts, Starlink's not the only game in town. It's the one everybody knows, right? Elon's done an amazing job of marketing himself and his companies. Yeah, everybody knows Tesla. They all know Starlink. They know SpaceX. But there's Amazon has their, Jeff Bezos has a network he's deploying. China has a network called StarNet that they're deploying. Telesat, company out of Canada, they've been around since the late 60s. They've got a new low Earth orbiting satellite network that they're deploying. OneWeb, a company out of the UK, government backed. There's one out of India. There are a ton of new networks being launched right now, and I'll call them 3G or 4G satellite internet networks. All of them are low Earth orbiting, so lots of satellites close to Earth, higher throughputs, lower latency. So we're looking at a huge technological change with regard to satellite telecommunications right now. This year's kind of a big year. As it stands right now, Starlink's the only one of these new guys that has their new network launched. Like I said, they have about 2,000 of their satellites in orbit right now. They got about 100,000 beta users. They plan to spend $10 billion with a B to get their network ultimately up and running. Very consumer focused, right? Looking at to the consumer as their customers. Same with Amazon, similar budget, $10 billion. They plan to launch with like 500, 600 satellites, ultimately have around 3,000 satellites in their final network. Same with Starnet, China's version. Don't know how many satellites because they keep it close to their vest. We don't really know. But so I think that's really interesting to learn about, what these new networks are going to look like. And they're saying, right now we've got about 9,000 satellites orbiting the Earth. By the time all these companies finish building these networks and launching these networks, we're talking about 100,000 satellites in orbit. That's just kind of mind-boggling and, brings up all kinds of questions like, what's this going to look like, right?
Well, I mean, definitely. I did a trip. I forgot where I was at, but I was coming home, driving in the interstate by myself, cruising. I think I was looking southwest, and then there it popped. I seen the Starlink constellation in the sky, and I literally pulled over because it is distinct. Once you see those satellites lined up in a vertical line, in a line, you're like, what is that? And so we're definitely going to, I think society will address the issue because it will change your view of unencumbered spaces. Because, when we talk about satellites, yeah, maybe from your house, you can't see it all the time. But when you go out into the wilderness, you're going to be able to see all those satellites. And there's just no doubt about it. And, I think that'll be one of the things to talk about. Plus, space collisions. Didn't we just have a close call not too long ago with one of the satellites? I think it was Starlink almost hitting the Chinese space station.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, it was like within the last few weeks. So we're going to see all kinds of different things that come out. Now, do I think it's awesome? I do. I think being able to have coverage wherever you choose to want to live, super important. Is it worth giving up the environment? I think me and you have been down the path where I think people said that about cell towers, right? Mm-hmm. We still need them. You still need to be able to communicate effectively. So definitely an exciting topic. I'm anxious to see how it all comes together. I definitely, from a business perspective, I think it's great to have more choice so that your employees can live anywhere they want. You can hire the best employee, no matter where they live, that can do the job that you need. Mm-hmm. So from a business perspective, I think it's super exciting. Yeah. We're limited today with what we can deploy as a company. I mean, you only have three or four different options, and that makes a difference.
Yeah. And you bring up some important points that people have talked about, and there's actually quite a bit going on behind the scenes. So just like in cellular, when people are concerned about, are there going to be towers everywhere? And the fact is that there's cell sites that you have no idea are there. They're what we call stealth. They look, people are familiar with some of the fake trees and stuff. There's so many cell sites that are on structures and behind structures that you have no idea are there. There's similar stuff going on for the satellite guys. So for example, there's a lot of concern about light pollution in the skies, especially for the astronomy community, that they're getting to the point where when they're doing a lot of the work they're doing on space research and astronomical research, that the probability of seeing one of these satellites in their view and that potentially overpowering the sensitivity of their lens and their electronics from being able to see what they're trying to see is increasing in odds. What's going on, though, is companies like Starlink, and we'll put some links in the show notes, they're doing a lot of technical development to help reduce the reflection of light off that satellite so that it doesn't create light noise. And, they're putting sun visors and things so that when the sun hits the satellite, it blocks that reflection from coming back down to Earth, things of that nature. So there is a lot that's going on behind the scenes where, the engineers aren't just, shooting all these things up there, and they've got a lot of capabilities where they've got these Krypton engines that they can move to navigate and avoid colliding with space junk or other things that are up there. They're communicating directly with each other, these satellites, via laser links, so that they can help each other avoid collision with other things. They've got guidance systems and navigation systems on them. So it's a pretty amazing technology. So I think those are a lot of concerns people have are valid ones, but it's cool when you start looking into it and you look into some of the links in our show notes that the engineers and these companies are doing things to mitigate some of those concerns. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think one of the things I had heard that, when we talk about these technologies, I mean, they are emerging brand new technologies that eventually that they'll want to build these satellites in space, 3D printing them, so they can deploy them without having to go through the expensive side of the launch. I have seen some articles and things about that, which is probably more practical than launching, a launch of 40 or 50 satellites, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
But that's becoming more commonplace for us with companies like Blue Orbit and SpaceX that can launch every month or every couple of weeks. They are launching at rates that we've never even seen before. So super exciting. I think that's interesting on your side of it. I guess I was a naysayer when I seen those Starlink satellites. I was like, great, we're going to see this everywhere.
Right. But and by the way, that line you see, that's just initial launch. So what they're doing is they're launching 20 satellites on one launch. And then basically those 20 satellites are deploying out of the capsule. And at that moment in time, they're all in line with each other. And then they navigate away from each other over time until they're in their final parked location. So they're not always together like that. So what you saw is actually pretty cool. You saw like right after a launch, like when they first deployed out of the capsule and they were lined up. And then within a few weeks, they're not lined up with each other anymore.
Yeah, as good as the iPhone camera is, I couldn't get a great photo. Well, super exciting topic. I have, in our research, I think it's important to bring up, this is in the news. And so you can find tons of articles written on it. I think it's exciting for where it's going and, having one more service to bring, the internet to all walks of life. Here we go.
Yep. Big year to watch it. Amazon's launching their first satellites this year, Starnet, and China's launching theirs. Telesat, same thing. So we'll keep you guys updated. As always, check out the website, 5gguys.com, to comment, to stay tuned with, blog posts and other things we have going on, show ideas. Let us know if anything we got wrong, and we'll address that and clarify it in a future episode. But as always, we appreciate the support and look forward to the next episodes.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.